Let's have a heart-to-heart as we compare the OnePlus 10 Pro and the iPhone 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max. Welcome everybody to AppleInsider. It is Andrew here, and you can find me on Twitter at Andrew_OSU. If you haven't done so already, I implore you to please go ahead and subscribe and enable those notifications so you don't miss a single video. Apple has released the iPhone 13 Pro in late 2021. In this video, I'm going to be comparing that iPhone 13 Pro against the much newer OnePlus 10 Pro. Now, yes, Apple is getting ready to introduce an iPhone 14 Pro in just a few months, so this is a little older of a device, but still, they stack up remarkably well, especially with the camera comparison that had each some winners and losers. We'll talk about that in a few moments, but I want to break these guys down. We're going to talk about the design and the displays and some things that really matter in actually using these two devices. So let's go ahead and dive into it. If it helps, use the chapter markers down below to skip to the sections that mean the most to you. I feel like most people are familiar with the iPhone's design. Of course, for the iPhone 13 Pro, we have a stainless steel body with glass on both the front and the back. In the top left of the back here, we have our 3 camera modules that are isolated in that standalone camera bump. Below one module, we do have the LiDAR scanner, which is used for a multitude of purposes, including autofocus, especially in low light. The OnePlus 10 Pro, though, is a little different. Of course, we have the gorgeous glass front, but I particularly love the back of this phone. It's got a bit of a shimmer to it that you can see kind of as I hit the light. It is an amazing effect and really looks a whole lot better in person. It also has this soft, almost velvety-like touch to it that's just unique, and I really very much enjoy it. The camera bump is a little different than on the iPhone. It still is isolating the camera bumps, but it wraps around the side a little bit. And of course, they are touting their relationship with Hasselblad that partnered with them on the cameras of the OnePlus 10 Pro. There we go. I got it eventually. Speaking of the cameras, the iPhone 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max have 3 cameras around the back. There is a 12 megapixel ultra wide angle lens, a 12 megapixel wide angle lens, and a 12 megapixel telephoto lens. That telephoto lens will give 3 times optical zoom. Looking at the OnePlus 10 Pro, we have 3 cameras as well, a 50 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 48 megapixel wide, and an 8 megapixel telephoto lens. Now that will give you 3.3 times telephoto zoom or optical zoom on the OnePlus 10 Pro. Looking at these two phone displays, starting with our iPhone 13 Pro. It is a 6.1-inch display, which measures 2532 by 1170. That gives you a pixel density of 460. Now, Apple says this is a Super Retina XDR display that supports ProMotion, which is able to adaptively change its refresh rate from 10 Hz all the way up to 120. And it also supports True Tone. Now, if we look at our OnePlus 10 Pro over here, the display is slightly larger. This is a 6.7-inch display, which is the same size as Apple's iPhone 13 Pro Max. It measures 3216 by 1440, which gives it a pixel density of 525. This is a higher pixel density than what we see on the iPhone side. You'll also notice there is no notch at the top of the phone. Instead, there's this hole punch cutout here, similar to what we are hearing to see on the iPhone 14 Pro line, but there is no notch, and I think it looks pretty darn nice. Now, this does support an adaptive refresh rate as well. It can go all the way down to 1 Hz and up to 120 Hz, beating Apple by a bit. It does support HDR, HDR10+, in fact, but it does not support True Tone because, of course, that is an Apple exclusive feature. Both of them come with either 128, 256, or 512 gigabytes of storage, but Apple also offers a 1 terabyte configuration for iPhone owners. So if you have a lot of media, use a lot of storage, the iPhone may be the better choice. Now let's do a bit of photo comparison between these two devices. So the iPhone, it still only has a 12 megapixel front-facing camera, but the OnePlus 10 Pro, it does have a 32 front-facing camera, and it's apparent when you're taking photos. So if we go ahead and double tap to zoom in on both of these, there's definitely some more detail in the one on the OnePlus, but it looks I don't know. I think I like the OnePlus. It definitely has a high resolution photo. It looks crisper. The iPhone is doing something odd with this background color. This looks more natural. I look maybe a little bit more pale, which is probably more realistic to myself. But they both look good, neither look bad, but I think that the OnePlus 10 Pro does have a better front-facing camera. Now let's look at photos from the rear-facing cameras. To test out the OnePlus 10 Pro and compare it to my iPhone 13 Pro, I took a trip out to Colorado and get some really neat shots. And I think both phones honestly did a fantastic job capturing things. So this here is taken at Garden of the Gods near Colorado Springs. They both look great using those primary cameras. If we jump in a little bit, there's good detail on both. The iPhone has a little bit more contrast going on in the mountains there. That's just kind of maybe a preference look, and I'm sure you can increase the contrast on the OnePlus and see how it does. When we start to zoom in, though, we see some more of the differences. If we jump into this photo, again, taken with a telephoto lens on each camera, the color's still different. Apple has this warmer tone to it, or more of like a yellowish tone to it. This is more red. The red is more realistic. These rocks are very red out there, so it seems Apple tried to put more of a natural earth tone to it. The OnePlus, I think this is more what it looked like when I was actually there. Now, despite the OnePlus having higher resolution cameras for the wide and ultra wide lenses, it only has an 8 megapixel telephoto lens. So this is what happens here. Looking at this shot on both phones, so we have 3 times zoom here, 3.3 times zoom here, there's already a big difference in the quality of the photo. Apple's is a 12 megapixel shot, where this is only an 8 megapixel shot. So you can see how much additional definition and contrast and detail there is in Apple shot versus the OnePlus. I get a little bit closer to the camera. You can see there's just a lot of graininess going on here and very little detail. This is barely a usable photo. So if you're using a stock at the 3.3 or 3 telephoto levels, the iPhone absolutely is looking a lot better. Here's another shot, this time again, 3 times optical zoom, 3.3 times optical. So this is only an 8 megapixel photo. They both look good until you start looking at the details too much. Then there's more detail here on the iPhone. And if we jump into that tree, you can see the night and day difference between the zoom level on the iPhone and this one. You can zoom in much more on the OnePlus, but is that a usable photo? I would not think so. This is neat. You can see that little tree on the top. You cannot tell what's going on here on the OnePlus 10 Pro. I will say though, when you're using that 48 megapixel wide angle lens, the OnePlus for sure does better. There's so much more detail. The colors look better. It is richer. I love this shot on the OnePlus 10 Pro. I think it definitely kicked the iPhone's butt in a lot of this. The details start to get murky on the iPhone, especially in the background, but these are so sharp. These are so sharp in the background, and it's you can't even compare them. It's definitely better on the OnePlus 10 Pro. So it looks like this guy is going to be better for the ultra wide and wide angle shots, but the iPhone is actually going to win with telephoto shots, which is something it usually lacks, and we see it usually dying against like the Samsung competition. So it's very interesting to see. Both of these have great looking cameras. It just depends on what you're going to use more, the wide and the ultra wide or the telephoto. I think shooting video on the iPhone 13 Pro is pretty great. Apple's added some neat features such as cinematic mode, but it is not as good as some of the ways that the OnePlus 10 Pro can handle. You can actually record 8K video, or you can shoot 120 frames per second in 4K. The iPhone caps you at 60 frames per second at 4K, and there's no 8K video supported on the iPhone 13 Pro line. I hope Apple adds that to the iPhone 14 Pro line here in late 2022. Let's talk about power. The iPhone 13 Pro is able to fast charge with up to 20 watts using a USB-C to Lightning cable. That will give you 50% charge in only 30 minutes. Pretty impressive. You also have the option to use Qi wireless charging, which is 7.5 watts, or you can use a MagSafe charger, which is up to 15 watts of wireless power. That pales in comparison to what the OnePlus 10 Pro can offer. Included in the box of my OnePlus 10 Pro is a 65-watt USB-C power brick. When you charge your phone with a very high wattage power adapter, you can actually charge your entire OnePlus 10 Pro in only 32 minutes. And if you do it over wireless, which is still 50 watts of wireless charging power, it can get a full charge in only 47 minutes. This is seriously cool. I love, love, love how fast this phone can charge. It means more time that you can use it and less time worrying about it on the charger. That said, if you're just charging your device at night, it may not be as big of a deal. But if there are ever times where you're trying to charge your phone quickly, you probably appreciate the speed with which the OnePlus 10 Pro offers. So there you have it, the iPhone 13 Pro and the OnePlus 10 Pro. Both remarkably amazing phones. And there are few Android phones in the market that I really connect with and really enjoy, and this guy has definitely been one of them. It was wonderful to shoot with out in Colorado, and I very much appreciated those 48 and 50 megapixel Hasselblad cameras on there. Fantastic. I do wish there was some more attention with the telephoto lenses on the OnePlus 10 Pro, but I also wish Apple would update its cameras because it hasn't done so in a long time other than with the computational photography. But we seriously need some upgrades to those sensors. Give us some higher resolution, give us 8K video, give us something new that we haven't seen before, Apple, and I hope that happens later this year with the iPhone 14 lineup. If you are still interested in either of these phones, we have links and deals for you down below in the description. Let me know your thoughts on this comparison on Twitter at Andrew_OSU or down below in the comments. Otherwise, stay tuned. Got a lot more videos headed your way.